020 722 42000.
Text 81333. Start your message with the word London.
BBC London 94.9.
Simon Lederman Show, BBC London 94.9. You would not imagine that the debate for this hour has absolutely started before we've even come on air. We'd love to continue taking your calls about the debate tonight. We've got other matters as well to discuss in this hour, which I'll bring into you very soon. But also want to welcome to the studio Jamie Kelsey-Fry. Hi. He's had a makeover.
I've had a makeover. I've had a
TV makeover. Jamie Kelsey-Fry is contributing editor of New Internationalist magazine. He's a friend of the programme. We've seen him probably now for the best part of 2 or 3 years, if not more.
Yeah, no, it's about 3 years.
And
it's been a beautiful thing.
Can we talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Being a non-smoker.
Yeah, 3 months in.
Yes.
Congratulations. Because that is the worst, you could argue. The worst is over.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I tried all kinds of different ways of doing it. And then the final way I tried to do it...
It was fear, wasn't it, in the end?
Well,
it was the news that you...
I'll tell you what it is, actually, buddy. It's I really am crazy about my partner. And we saw, a couple of years ago, we had a festival, and we saw this, older hippie character being pushed along in the dark in his wheelchair by his partner. And he had to stop to get his oxygen mask out, and I just looked at her and I thought, I don't want Anita to go through that. I love her way too much, man. So that was like the real push, basically. But it's great. I can taste, I can run, I can smell, I'm even cooking.
Come on, let's not go overboard with running. There's no need to go mad. Really, come on, you're not an animal. 0207 224 2000 is our number. Let me just check with the henchman. Should we bring in the other matters now as well, or not? Later, or yes? Oh, yes, do it now, right. Because let me just talk to you about some of the other things we want to discuss, and then I'm going to get Jamie Kelsey-Fry's reaction to the debate so far this evening. So a few things we want to talk about. This have you got your head? Oh, good, you have, because this is something you need to listen to. This is something I heard today, and I was quite captivated by it, because I think everybody knows probably the kind of person that they are. They know whether, if there were a debate or a row or a lively discussion taking place, or indeed somebody was being harassed in public, you either know if you would stand in and get involved. You also know probably if you're more likely not to. And this is what you're about to hear is an excerpt. Have you heard this? This is in Australia. This is a woman on a Sydney train. Brilliant. And she is hearing...
I've heard of it.
You've heard, but you haven't heard it?
No, it sounds great.
She's hearing a Muslim woman being harassed on a train for wearing a hijab. That's probably all you need to know. I'm just trying to think if there's anything that you can't hear. I'm going to tell you the first bit that is said, because that's the bit that I think is the most difficult to hear. So the person who starts on the Muslim woman, first of all asks, why do you wear a hijab? Why do you wear it for a man that marries a 6-year-old girl? So that was the question. You'll hear that question, but just in case you couldn't hear it properly, here it is.
Why are you wearing it for a man that married a 6-year-old girl?
She wears it for herself, okay? She wears it because she wants to be modest with her body, not because of people like you who are going to sit there and disrespect her. Okay? That's not her doing it. That is a minority of people, not a majority of people, okay? It doesn't matter what they're doing. Don't sit there disrespecting someone that's got nothing to do with it. Okay? Have some respect. Have some respect. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. What's that got to do with this poor lady? What's it got to do with her?
Nothing.
Exactly.
You're the one that started the argument.
No, you're the one that's sitting there saying things under your breath. Shut your mouth. Simple.
You shut your mouth.
You shut your mouth. If you've got nothing nice to say, don't say anything. Simple.
I think it got a bit comedic at the end with you shut your mouth. Well, shut your mouth. But the rest of that, I thought, was a fascinating insight into the human condition, because I think we know where we stand. I think you would definitely get involved.
I think a huge majority actually would, and it's brilliant to bring this up, actually. There's this silent majority, but the vast majority who remain silent, who actually stand up for very much the same sense of what humanity is. And what that woman was doing there, loads of people would. Interestingly, in Australia, when they had the incident in the cafe, which is probably only about 2 or 3 months, about 4 months ago, isn't it, where there was an extremist and a number of people were murdered in that cafe. I'm sure you remember. I'm pretty sure it was in...
we were sadly getting live footage as it was coming through, and we saw the very moving scenes of those people running away into the arms of...
That's right.
Yeah,
shocking
just the
footage,
most moving
really
footage, yeah.
So the next day, massive hashtag in Australia was "I will walk with you," because there was a story that came out immediately, implying.
Oh, I
threats,
remember this. Yeah, just explain this. Yeah,
implying threats to Muslims who were going to work the next morning, and as a result, a huge amount of people started this hashtag, and it was a network by which white Australians were saying, "I will walk with you to work," and it was enormous. And I think that is this is the silent majority who actually just want pure humanity, to believe in that, don't believe in the politics of hate, and actually do stand up, like that woman did in that excerpt just now. I think it's a really brilliant thing to bring up.
Do you think it is our responsibility to do it? Because there's two things I'd like to make a point here. One, I thought the negotiation/argument that she was involved in was very clever, because she clearly was very passionate. I don't think she lost it at any point. And actually, she was enabled. Shut up. No, you shut up. But she also enabled the woman who started castigating from the beginning to actually agree, no, I know that. So she kind of knew that she was wrong. But secondly, it can end in one of two ways. It can end peacefully, but it could also end in a pretty upsetting way.
That's the problem, and that's the fear that really holds a lot of people back. I saw a fantastic incident on the Overground last week where we all crammed in onto the train, and there was an Asian guy, and then sitting opposite him was an Eastern European builder, looked like a builder. As soon as the Eastern European builder sat down, it looks like they've been on that train often. The Eastern European builder started having a go at this Asian guy and getting really threatening really quickly. Okay, over here to the right, there's this elderly Afro-Caribbean sort of church-going woman who instantly just stood up, and this builder was a really big hulk of a guy and very threatening. And she stood up and she said to the Asian guy, "Please swap seats with me, I'll deal with this," and sat down and said, "Look, you don't need to speak to that guy like that, and if you have any real anger in your life, take it out on me, let's discuss it," and just totally flattened the guy. And there was this sudden, brief flutter of applause, where it's just one of those moments where that bubble gets pricked, and we all realise we actually, respect that kind of humanity. But you're right. The only problem is what happens when people, if they're kind of really intoxicated and really angry and full of hate, they can become really threatening and dangerous, and you have to be sadly aware of that as well. But I'd rather, a life lived on your knees is a life not lived at all.
No, indeed. I think you're right in that. Is it our duty, based on what you've heard, and we'll play it again a bit later, I think it's a fascinating piece of audio, is it our duty to defend others on public transport? And have you ever intervened in anything, particularly if it's on public transport, but indeed anywhere else at all? And what is the key to doing that successfully, where you manage to stand down an argument, you manage to really calm the waters, but you don't end up making things far, far worse? Yeah. So I want to talk about that. We get reaction on 0207 224 2000. I'm still going to hear Jamie Kelsey-Fry's view about the debate tonight. We've got some calls on that to go to in a few moments' time. Also, one of the most disturbing stories in the last 24 hours was the 400 migrants who were feared drowned after their boat capsized off Libya. The Italian Coast Guard rescued 144 people from the boat on Monday and launched an air and sea search operation in the hopes of saving others. We remember talking last year on this programme that there had been a lot of people who had been killed crossing the Mediterranean to Italy. As many as 3,500 died while making that journey. And there was this debate. Remember that the Italian government's maritime rescue operation was scaled back because the view was in Europe that this was actually encouraging migrants to take that trip rather than putting them off and being there as a source of safety. So a really disturbing story. There's now a call for this additional support to be brought back in place. And we'd love to know what you make of this, because whether Europe can stop migrants dying in the Mediterranean is question one. Do you think we can, and there's enough that we can do? And should this country particularly be doing more to prevent these migrant deaths in the Med? It's hideous to be happening, full stop. It's even more concerning when it's about people who are desperate to come over to Europe. And these are lives. And we're talking about, in some cases, many children as well.
Well, it's going to get much worse. And, you have to look for, that boat was coming from Libya, I believe, wasn't it?
Yes.
So, we've left Libya in tatters. It was mainly Hillary Clinton, if I remember correctly, who really pushed for that military action in Libya, and it's now left in complete tatters. You've got to ask yourself, you've got to sit back and bring up one of the things that wasn't brought up in the debate, which is you've got to really look at our foreign policies and how responsible are we for these amount of people who literally, it's get across that water or die, or watch my children die. So that situation has arisen from really disastrous foreign policies that are, in my opinion, much more to do with, chasing and securing the last resources, particularly energy resources, nothing to do with well-being and humanity. And also climate change, which we're profoundly responsible for. And that's going to cause millions more people trying to get across the waters and get across into the countries. And as I said, in situations whereby if we don't, we die. So it's just the tip of the iceberg, and it's going to be a disaster. And we need to take responsibility, for God's sake, rather than be part of the parties who are going, right, we're going to pull back on our humanitarian aid. It's just, we've got to take responsibility and do the right thing. All
right, we'll get reaction on that, please, as well. 0207 224 2000, and, of course, more on tonight's BBC election debate. Nigel is in Temple Fortune. Evening to you, Nigel.
Good
Welcome
morning to the show.
To the show.
Well, I want to talk about the debate, and a couple of remarks were made by Tony and by Iqbal. I thought the debate, like all these debates, like British politics, is completely and utterly lacklustre. As a photojournalist who photographs politicians, I would imagine, if not daily, every other day, I think that the interesting thing about politics in this country, it's comedic, and there's lots of satire of the politics, the way politics is reported. But campaigns are lacklustre and dull, and they don't, I think, encapsulate the nation. If you look at American politics, whether you like them or not, there's far more razzmatazz, there's far more of a party, there's far more involvement from the community. But I think
there's a couple of things. I mean, one is that you could argue that an election is a very serious business, and also we're not voting for, well, we shouldn't be voting for the personalities like they do in America. We should be voting on serious policies. And I suppose
hang on a second. Go on. Hang on a second. Everybody listening to your show votes for two things in politics: personalities and a pound in their pocket. And anyone who says they aren't is a liar. Because everyone is selfish for the pound in their own pocket, and they vote for the person who thinks got a good personality. Now, out of all of those leaders, they've all got good personalities in one way or another, and that's why they're a leadership. If they didn't have any personality, they wouldn't be a leader.
So what of their personalities? If they have such great personalities, why was it a lacklustre debate?
Because all the debates, because they are filtered, pre-arranged questions, there's no open debate from the audience, they're dull. All electioneering is dull. You get politicians walking around local boroughs, patting children on the head, going around with clipboards. It's not, there's no energy involved in it. I think from my point of view, I thought Tony's remarks were rather fatuous, really, saying that why should we let Sun readers vote on a referendum? It's like saying, why should we let fat-bellied taxi drivers vote? Well, of course, taxi drivers are great people, and everybody should be allowed to vote for a referendum. So I think that Tony's remarks were rather just fatuous to say that people who read the Sun shouldn't be allowed to vote for a referendum.
If you took it away from what he said about people who read the Sun, maybe if he'd worded it thus that people who don't understand about what would happen if we were in and what would happen if we were out shouldn't be allowed to vote, that would make more sense.
Well, no, that's even more patronising by assuming people don't know what's going on in the world. I thought Iqbal's statement was quite interesting. I like Iqbal a lot. I thought his remarks about social housing was interesting, because at the end of the day, social housing isn't there for one or two very simple reasons. It's diminishing. If councils had 20 or 30,000 homes on their borough to maintain, you and I, as a ratepayer in a borough, would have to pay more rates. Now, I don't care what anybody listening to your show is tonight. If you ask anyone listening to your show, would they pay £100 a month more community or council tax charges, they would say no. I don't believe they would want to pay more. And if you are a council, whether it's Barnet or Barking or Westminster or Kensington or Teddington, wherever it is in the 32 London boroughs, and they own all these homes have to be maintained, they have to be safe, they have to be fit for purpose, and maintaining a property, as anyone who owns one will tell you, costs money. If you've got 10,000, it costs a hell of a lot of money, and they would pass those costs on to the ratepayer.
Jamie?
I think what you're saying about what Tony's comment, people don't know what's going on in the world, and you're saying it's patronising, and in fact, people do. What was really interesting was one of the tweets that came out at the end of that debate we just saw, Nigel, was the most looked up question during the debate on Google was, what is austerity? And I thought it was really interesting that the three women, Leanne and Natalie and Nicola, they all, with their opening speeches, talked about austerity and assaulting austerity. And the fact that a huge amount of people then went and looked it up is really disturbing. Because for me, that's absolutely brilliant. You know, I understand you're saying it's dull and lacklustre. I completely agree with you. But it's pretty exciting to some extent to have three women who are bonding together, hugging together at the end, which I think is a really big deal, to be honest.
That.
Yeah, but for them to all be going, we are anti-austerity. I mean, I look at it in a much wider perspective with New Internationalist in mind. And, you know, you've got the anti-Troika movement happening at the moment. What happens in Frankfurt on the 18th of March, I think is very important, that Blockupy movement. What you've got with Syriza, what you've got with Podemos, you've got emerging a much more interesting sensibility that's going, this economic system, the way it's currently functioning since Thatcher and the sort of Big Bang, it's failed. Austerity's failed out. Austerity is a scam and a lie. The ECB, in fact, don't have it. How can they be acting in the way they are? No one's given them any kind of democratic control. And there's actually a kind of people are pulling at the threads of this system. And for those three women to start off by doing that, you know, that was more than lacklustre. That was pretty exciting, I think. You know, what do you think about that?
Well, it's interesting, but I don't think anybody are going to be in a government. I think the poor lady from Wales has got 4 seats to maintain. I think Natalie Bennett, hasn't got much hope at all, I think, really. And they from Scotland, I think, is the strongest out of the three of them. But, you know, we talk about austerity, we talk about finances, we talk about the country. It doesn't matter who you vote for. And I'm not going to be voting for Cameron. I think that clearly our country is in a better position now than it was 5 or 10 years ago financially, and that's a fact. You know, we've got inflation at a 55-year low, interest rates are low, we've got people able to spend more money than they have. All right, wages aren't increasing as they should do, which is awful. But the point is, our country's better than it was 5 or 10 years ago. Yeah. And I think that clearly that is an issue. I think come the general election, my prediction will be a slight edge ahead by Cameron. Okay.
Well, I mean, you know, saying whether the country is in a better position than it has been, I mean, how do you measure that? What's your yardstick? And, you know, you could also look at the situation. There's 1 million people using food banks. There's, you know, a huge amount of young people who are kind of living below the poverty line. It was interesting in the debate, actually. I think it was Nicola Sturgeon who pointed out that, in fact, in Ed Miliband's constituency itself, I can't remember what the statistics were, but it's something like a third of the young people in his constituency are living below the 29%. Yeah, Leanne Wood was saying that 29% of young people in Miliband's own constituency are living in poverty.
Nigel, just lastly, in terms of the value of that debate, without David Cameron and without Nick Clegg, did it have value or not?
I think it has value for the sort of second tier. But can I just come back on what you just said? Your colleague, Jamie, I beg your pardon. What you said about people living on the poverty or youngsters. What amazes me about youngsters today, and I'm in my late 40s, is that youngsters are spending money on mobile phones and iPads and computers and tablets. Well, if they're that bad off, how can they afford to own them and buy them and use them?
Well, they can't though. That's the point. You know, you might see a number of youngsters out there with mobile phones, but I guarantee there's a huge amount of youngsters out there who can't afford to get mobile phones. Of course they can't. They're living below the poverty line, you know. But yeah, I agree. You see a lot of young people out there with mobile phones, but it's certainly not correct to say, you know, they've got lots of money and they seem to be squandering it. No, they're not. There's a huge amount. It's an embarrassing amount with the 5th richest country in the world, and we've got huge amounts of young people who are going to school hungry. Mothers having to choose between eating and heating. You know, I don't think we have been, you know, we are better off 10 years later. But there's more of a point when you bring in the idea of young people. You know, I think you're very right to say, sadly, this is the situation whereby people will vote to do with personality or to do with the pound in your pocket. But actually, I think that, you know, it's important that people started voting so that there is some decent, fair, sustainable future for young people. And at the moment, there absolutely isn't. You know, one of the huge elephants in the room is catastrophic climate change. It's only mentioned once during the debate just now. It's unbelievable.
I must tell you, just 2 things. I went to a very interesting hustings the other evening. Yeah. Harriet Harman and some others at kids company.
Yes, I read about that in the Standard. Yeah.
I did the pictures. It was fascinating, and the youngsters there were a vibrant audience. Yeah. And they had some great points to make. And it was really interesting to see how passionate they were about the issues. It was really quite heartwarming. I hope some other youngsters take up the sort of gauntlet the way that they did. But can I just say one last thing, if I can, about climate change?
Yeah.
I know it's going to upset you, and you're going to bang the desk. But I don't buy the argument, I'm afraid.
Well, that's okay. I mean, either you're a scientist or you're not. I mean, I'm not a scientist, but if you study the science, it's absolutely incontrovertible, you know.
Well, you know, we had the ice age, and then it melted, and that's before we had the internal combustion engine, and that wasn't due to man. That was due to weather and cyclic conditions. That's how I base my things on. I mean, we all have a responsibility, I think, to be fair, reasonable, and look after things. But I don't buy it in the way you do. But it's good debating with you. And I hope to speak to you again sometime.
Okay, all the best.
Thanks, Nigel. Thank you, Jamie. 0207 224 2000. Jamie Kelsey-Fry is here to review the day and to take your calls this hour. We're talking, obviously, about tonight's election and certainly challenges debate. We're talking about whether it is absolutely our right and our duty to get involved in a row, particularly a row when it is a minority person that is needing defence. We'll play it again at some point a bit later on, and also the migrants who are travelling over from Libya, risking their lives on the boat. And we talked last year about the money that was pulled back from that because it was thought that it was encouraging people to make that very desperately worrisome journey, but actually seemingly it made no difference. And we now have the case, as we heard, I think we woke up a couple of days ago, 400 migrants feared drowned. Let me ask you one question about austerity that you mentioned, because there are two very clear views. There are people like the IMF who are very supportive. They weren't supportive at the very beginning, but having seen what has happened with austerity, they believe it has had some sense of success and something that they could not necessarily have foreseen, and they've encouraged other countries to follow suit. There's also a very grave concern that if you push back from austerity, what you end up doing is creating debt for the future.
It's debt for who? I mean, the only people who are doing well out of austerity are the people who arguably caused the crisis in the first place, and that can't be right. I mean, you know, there's a story that we might bring up later, but I've done quite a lot of work over the past year with disabled people against cuts. You know, there is an out-and-out attack on people living with disabilities. Just because the situation of their birth, they are living in a situation where independent living funds are probably going to be cut from them, even though they won in the courts of justice to preserve it. Ian Duncan Smith just turned around and said, no, I'm going to cut it anyway. These are people who are literally dying because of the situation of austerity, of cuts, when they don't need to be. Whereas the people who've caused that crisis are creaming it. And that's, you know, a very simple, broad stroke way of putting it. But it's a scam that goes back to the 70s. New Internationalists wrote about this in 2011. It's called The Great Rebellion, a really good issue. And basically, this used to be called structural adjustment. So IMF and the World Bank and WTO, who I believe are certainly not on the side of humanity in any way whatsoever, have been in the pockets of the corporations since the 50s, as far as I can see. So I think they've got no sort of credit at all, and they shouldn't be behaving the way they are, obviously. But what they would do is you can get a country in debt. So in the majority world, they get a country into huge amounts of debt, call in the debt, you're not able to pay the debt, right, so you have to privatise all your transport services, privatise your education, we're going to privatise your water, and they just completely break down countries through debt. They control countries through debt. That's an old scam. It was called structural adjustments, and they developed it, rolled it out from the 70s, and were kind of destroying countries. All the countries in the majority world have got used to this. They don't fall for that scam anymore. So as New Internationalists pointed out in 2011, what's happening now is they're playing the scam on their own people. It's a scam. The people who've caused these huge debts are the people who don't suffer these cuts. The people who haven't got anything to do with it are dying. Mothers are choosing between heating or eating. You know, kids are going to school hungry. And, you know, people living with disabilities are having their lives cut.
Do any of the 7 people who were on the debate a couple of weeks ago have the answer?
The closest is the Greens. Closest is the Greens, but, you know...
Bennett.
Yeah. But I really do like the idea of Natalie Bennett and Nicola Sturgeon and Leanne Wood having some kind of weight as 3 together, because they're 3 parties who are using anti-austerity talk. We need a radical change. You know, to go back to what I was saying with Nigel, if you are a young person, you know, the first question was from Charlotte, you know, the token young person's question, and it's inevitably going to be, I'm young, what the hell are you going to do for me? They don't have those answers yet, because the answers for Charlotte are absolutely systemic radical change. You can't continue to have an economic system based on infinite growth, but which relies on finite resources. We can't hold our heads high as human beings and know that, in fact, we've got a sham of a government that's actually doing the wishes of financial institutions, multinational corporations and banks. That's who calls the shots. The City of London calls the shots. You know, that's a real problem. If Charlotte wants a decent answer, she needs to be actually working with grassroots movements that are actually looking for systemic radical change. All
right, keep those thoughts coming through. Jamie Kelsey-Fry is our guest this hour. He is contributing editor of New Internationalist magazine. Our phone number is 0207 224 2000. Simon Lederman Show, BBC London 94.9. 11:30 is the time, and Sarah Morris has the headlines.
London's news at 11:30. Ed Miliband has used the third of 4 televised election programmes to reassert that he wants a majority Labour government after the...
Call 020 722 42000.
Text 81333. Start your message with the word London.
BBC London 94.9.
Simon Lederman Show, BBC London 94.9. Jamie Kelsey-Fry here this hour to review the day and to take your calls. Bill is in the borough. Evening to you, Bill.
Hello, gentlemen. How are
Evening. Welcome.
Hello, Bill.
Jamie.
Yes.
How did you get to have the thoughts you have on things?
I tell him everything in his ear before he speaks. I say this.
I could believe that in some cases, but not with this guy.
It's a great ventriloquist act, basically. I'm I'm just a puppet. How did I get the views that I've got? The
way you think, I find it really refreshing, because you go against the grain, which, you look at it, is sensible. But the denial out there, it amazes me. So I'm wondering, how come you can think the way you're thinking?
I could go on for ages about that answer, but a couple of simple ones. One is I work for New Internationalist, and they've got an incredibly great view. But also, I had a gun put to my head back in 1981 in Palestine, and it was my epiphany moment, Bill, because I'm a middle-class lad from South London, mum and dad still together, pretty safe upbringing, and suddenly I kind of experienced firsthand how a huge amount of people are living in injustice around the world. And I suddenly thought, well, if I'm this privileged, then I should use my privilege to kind of get involved, inform myself and get active. But also I was with Occupy. I was outside St Paul's for 4.5 months. I realised we'd touched a raw nerve. We were right. It's the economic system, and we have to deal with that, So I just kind of, got out there and experienced it, really, buddy. But New Internationalist is a really useful way of informing yourself of these kind of arguments. I'm glad you approve of it. I thought maybe you were about to say, where'd you get these ridiculous ideas from, mate?
Well, we don't know. Let's find out. Bill?
No, my views are a lot like... I'm terrible on names sometimes.
Go on, give me a clue.
I've got the same views. I came from South London as well. The only thing posh about me, through circumstances, I was born in Chelsea, so on my birth certificate it says Chelsea, which even James can't do.
That should become your moniker now. Bill from Chelsea.
But I mean, seriously, a lot of your judgments are based on common sense and common fact, which seems to go out the window too often. The people that are paying the most are the poor. I can't feel sorry for a rich person. Because they're going to... If you have a person on £5,000 and a person on £5 million and not allow them to increase the wealth, borrow any money, but just order food to survive, the person with £5,000 is going to die quicker than the person with 5 million. So I'm not going to cry over someone that's got a vast amount of wealth. No way in this way. But the way you hear it, it's like you've got to feel sorry for the rich person. And go against the poor person.
But do you think some of this is not necessarily about demanding our sympathy, but it is actually about fear, and whether that fear is justified or not? In fact, it'd be useful for you both to think about this. What I hear the reason is we need to worry about the rich. I'm not rich. I think, if anything, Jamie's probably wealthier than me, because I know that you live in Zone 2 and I live in Zone 3. I know that because I saw you at your home train station one day. And Bill, you also live in Zone. Which zone are you? You're Zone 1.
I live in Zone 1.
So you must be loaded.
On all of it.
So there we are. But what
I help you on all of it. I can give you any argument you'd like, and I will discredit it.
Well, let me tell you what I understand it as. When in the 70s we had, I think, the very top rate of tax, something like 97%, the rich deserted the country. The reason why some of the rich are rich, not the ones who've managed to get money through perhaps nefarious methods, but the reasons why some of the rich are rich, because they are the people who are the force behind the economy. They are the people who create the jobs, and therefore the fear is if they leave, the jobs and the businesses and the success leaves with them.
I'm sorry, there's you being indoctrinated again, because if you look on it sensibly, from the Second World War up to quite recently, we were in debt. We accepted a debt that our grandchildren still had to pay off. And that debt was indirectly through America, not wiping out our debt, which they did with Germany, which they did with Japan. And the other misnomer, when the tax was 75%, right? You can look this up, because I'm not telling anything that ain't there slapping you in the face. We still had millionaires here. We still paid off the debt. We designed Concorde. We still had a health service. Yeah? So please don't go down the road of I should feel sorry for someone who's rich. They allow us to have people. There was a guy, I forget his name, but if you look out there, he'd been in the army, came out of the army, had a disorder, was, at the lowest of the low. And through circumstance, because he couldn't afford his electricity, his insulin couldn't be kept. He was so proud, he wouldn't tell his sister what was happening. And that guy at the autopsy had a completely empty stomach. No food in it at all. You try doing that.
So why is it that none of the major parties are saying not just a 45% top rate, not just a 50% top rate, not even just a 60% top rate, which I think is what the Greens and Natalie Bennett are offering, but actually just say, look, if no one needs to earn more than £200,000 a year. If you're lucky enough to do that, we're going to whack it up to 80 or 90. If that would work, and the rich are actually not that many in number in terms of an electorate, then what would be the problem? Why is no party offering that?
Because I can look at all those party things. Basically, it's down at the moment at the atrocious things of characters. Now, you had a president of the United States that was an actor, for God's sake. He didn't have a political background, and if you're going to go,
let's talk about this country.
What people look,
because we're talking about tonight's debate, and what you were saying was you don't understand why you should have sympathy with the rich. My question is, why do politicians not tax the rich as much as they can? Because the vast amount of the electorate does not come from people who are earning more than £200,000. They make up how much of the country? Probably about 5%.
Yeah, but they make up a large percent of the people funding the political parties, though, don't they? I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? 19 million or something like that. No, 9 million given by hedge funders just to the Conservative Party alone.
Yeah, but isn't one of the answers, if you wanted to get guaranteed success in politics, you say, I'm going to tax the rich because you're not rich. I'm going to make sure that all of their money goes to you because that's what we could do. Yeah. Who needs Linton Crosby? That's your campaign. You don't need any money for that. Bill, last thought.
Simon,
who won tonight? Very briefly, Bill. Who won tonight?
Nobody won tonight because the candidates up there are controlled by, after the election, when the reality comes in of having to deal with this big, big debt, they're bound. And we're going to be, in the next 10 years, in austerity if you allow these things to happen.
All right, Bill, got to move on because we've got
Bill.
other callers to get through. Jamie Kelsey-Fry is here to review the day. Bill is in zone 1. You're in zone 2.
Bill's in the zone.
He's in the zone as well. And I'm way out there. Laura is in Camden. Evening to you, Laura.
Good evening to both of you.
Hi, Laura.
Hi, well, I watched it, all of it, from beginning to end. And a few things really leapt out. Sturgeon asked Miliband if he'd form a coalition with her if in order to get the Tories out, if the potential was there. And he kept smiling and ignoring and being evasive. And she finally said, "Well, you'd rather see the Tories in, then, would you, than to form a coalition with us, with me, and get them out?"
Yeah, that was a great moment. Yeah,
for the betterment of Britain, and he still didn't reply. I thought that was disingenuous of him because if the potential were there, if he had no choice, of course he would form a coalition. You know, he's not going to do himself out of that job.
Do you think he's been affected by the Conservative Party campaign that has what it did have Alex Salmond and possibly now Nicola Sturgeon in his pocket?
I don't think
reverse, actually, of course.
Well, I don't know, but the thing that most of us notice about politicians when they're on TV being interviewed or quizzed or challenged is that they always they're not to be trusted. They look disingenuous. They look insincere. But with him tonight, it was clearly there that he was not answering the question, and even David Dimbleby said to him, the question from the audience is, who would you form a coalition with? And I know that you would want to get in with a majority, so I've already answered that part of it for you. Now just tell us who you'd form a coalition with. Well, Miliband spent the next 5 minutes blabbering on.
Exactly, yeah.
And avoiding answering the question. And I thought, right, forget him for a start. And then on the Trident issue, the men were for Trident. The three women were against Trident. The three women believe in empowering the forces and looking after the forces and protecting Britain, but not wasting money and spending money on Trident. And actually, whose right is it to wipe out a whole region? And would someone wipe out a whole region with the press of a button? And Miliband said he wouldn't press the button, but he yabbered on about ISIS. Well, you don't wipe out a whole region of the world just because of ISIS, because you're wiping out millions of people, you're contaminating the soil, you're going to cause generations of babies to be born deformed and disfigured with chronic degenerative illness. You have no right, especially if you believe in God or anything like that, to do that to a whole region. So let's use common sense. You don't waste all that money on that. You spend it instead on empowering the forces, increasing them from 80,000 to whatever. And when you send your forces to Afghanistan, Iraq or anywhere else, and I don't agree with those wars, but still, when you do, you provide them with protective clothing and protective facilities, etc., and gear. Many of the soldiers have died or been maimed and injured because they haven't been given that protective stuff because the government's saving money. Well, how come you've all of a sudden got the money to spend on Trident, and yet you don't want to use Trident, but you just want it there to cause fear? It doesn't make sense. And Trident goes as far as 7,000 miles? Where is that? I don't know. Where's 7,000 miles?
I don't know. Is the honest answer.
Egypt, Africa is 7,000 miles, isn't it?
I don't know. Yeah. And then we've got the Natalie Bennett talking about the Saudis. Did you hear that one?
Yes, there was a very brief mention of the Saudis.
Yeah.
What do you think about that when she was talking about that, Laura?
Quite right too. Yeah, she was the only one. You need to stop this malarkey of the Wahhabis. Bin Laden was a Wahhabi. The Al Qaeda are Wahhabis. The fundamentalism, the craziness of religion. That side of it, from the madrasas and all that. It's a Saudi thing, and yet the politicians are doing handshakes with them, doing business because it's money, and then it's just a crazy affair. And she was the only one to mention the Saudis and to say we need better diplomacy, we need to put an end to all this crazy stuff, blah, blah, blah. So I gave her marks on that. And another thing...
So just out of interest, because of what you're bringing up here, the major issues that you see for the country is not necessarily about the housing, not necessarily about taxation, but actually about defence and certainly the world as we see it.
No, I'm just giving you an overview. There was another thing she said, and that was it for me. That was the final straw. She said to Miliband, your own shadow minister, I don't know, Rachel, Rebecca, whatever Reeves.
Rachel Reeves, yeah.
There you go. She had the nerve. She's the Department of Work and Pensions Minister, and she had the nerve to say, I don't want to represent unemployed people. Yeah. And when she said that to Miliband, he squirmed, right? And that was it. I thought, right, if that's what his own minister, who's meant to be protecting and caring for these people, says, which shows utter contempt, I thought, that is it. So I can't vote for SNP because I'm in London. Yeah, right. And I can't vote for the Cymru whatever, because I'm not in Wales.
Like Cymru.
Yeah. The only three women talked sense as far as I could see. So I can see, and I can't vote for Miliband or Cameron or Clegg.
Right, so we're narrowing it down nicely to no one.
No, there's only one option. I mean, none of these people are geniuses. None of them are Stephen Hawking or anything else. So you've got to go by who is eliminating themselves.
And this will be the Greens who remain.
The one who, on the Trident issue, on the welfare issue. Yeah. I mean, the welfare issue is important. She mentioned the people not being able to feed themselves, can't get out of bed, in bed, dressed or whatever, or the unemployed, the food banks, which have risen to what I know,
million people,
from about 50 to about 450, and if this lot stay in power, it'll rise up to about 1,000 food banks across Britain. How anyone can consider keeping this government in power is beyond my understanding.
Didn't we have the same debate, though, when we had the election in 2010, and the same people, well, not the same people, but the same sentiment was, how can anybody keep this government in power because of what has happened to the economy, was the cry that time. I suppose the question is whether somebody like Natalie Bennett of the Greens, you believe, is strong enough, is powerful enough, has enough general assistance and general flair to be able to run every aspect of government rather than just those very important areas that you raised.
Well, she wouldn't end up being. I don't think she'd end up being the prime minister. I mean, she's not going to get that many votes.
No, indeed, but I suppose the point is that's probably what you're after.
But I think it's a choice between a coalition between the awful Tories and someone, or the awful Labour and someone, because Labour lied before. As Natalie Bennett or Sturgeon said, you guys were the ones who brought in Atos.
But isn't the problem here is the same problem that Nick Clegg faced with Lib Dems? Lib Dems hadn't had a chance yet to disappoint and to not necessarily fulfil manifesto promises. Once they got into power, that's exactly what happened. Not with everything, but with some things, as we know. Isn't that exactly what will happen with any party that hasn't yet got to power? The reason why some of these parties have a sheen on them is because they've never let us down. They also haven't fulfilled anything, but they've certainly never let us down.
Well, yeah, but I can't keep voting for the devil I know.
Yeah.
I mean, I think last time I probably voted for Lib Dem because I was so disgusted with Labour and the Atos and the welfare and this and that, and what they were doing to the more vulnerable people, and yet looking after the bankers, and yet looking after the corporations who were not paying any taxes. I was so disgusted, as were many other people, and all those other people were voting Lib Dem, and then we ended up with this crazy situation. Now all those people, they don't want to vote for Lib Dem. They certainly won't vote for the Conservatives, because they weren't going to vote for the Conservatives anyway.
Laura, I've got to leave it there because I want to fit one more call in before midnight, but you're certainly on form tonight. Thank you for the call.
Thank you.
Have a good night. This is Ali, who says Nicola Sturgeon won by a mile. She was confident, assertive, and really showed up Ed Miliband, who resorted to disrespectfully sneering at her and shaking his head when he was speaking. She'd make a great Prime Minister, which is more than can be said for the man who has a separate kitchen for his nanny. Just think, a nanny, how very Labour, wouldn't you agree? Let's go to Federico, who is in Forest Hill. Federico, evening. You're through to Jamie Kelsey-Fry, and you're through to me.
Hello. May I address the next couple of sentences to Jamie Kelsey?
Fry, you may.
From an Iranian internationalist to an English internationalist, I would say bravo. This country should be proud of you and who you are. And
that's a good start, Federico. Thank you very much. Thank you.
As far as I wanted to talk about the boat people, and I can say this, 5 years ago when Muammar Gaddafi was still the ruler of Libya, there was not one single Libyan refugee on any boat to Europe.
Yeah.
Libyans were the richest Africans. They had social security, they had jobs, and they had enough money not to want to emigrate to any other country. 5 years ago was exactly the same situation with Syria. Syria did not have refugees. Today, because of the interference of two colonial powers, United States and Britain, we have got millions of refugees who are dying unnecessarily because the conditions of their lives in their own country, it has become impossible.
Yeah, exactly. And we are responsible for that, and we should take responsibility for that, and we should have parties who are trying to get us to vote for them to be talking about these issues, giving us the reassurance that they're not just completely sort of UK-centric and they're completely got their heads in the sand about what's happening in the future in this species, in this world. You know, you've got climate change, and climate change is going to be incredibly serious, but we also have to be responsible for these colonialist activities, which you've just described so well, and they extend to the huge amount of damage that's been done in Iraq and the huge amount of damage that's been done in Afghanistan. We're still waiting to find out about the Chilcot inquiry, to find out if we're actually going to be, so that we can find out if we're actually going to be allowed to accuse Tony Blair of being a war criminal, which I really hope the Chilcot inquiry. Yeah, and we need to take responsibility for that. You know, this country, someone said it in the debate, actually, I can't remember who it was, but I guarantee it was one of the three women, said that what we need to do is actually act in a way that is different, that is actually something to be proud of and dignified on the international stage. And we need to do that as soon as possible. We are an incredibly powerful little island. And so instead of being responsible for another couple of years of devastation around the world, we could be doing the opposite. We could be taking responsibility and forging ahead for a kind of international movement that actually reaches towards equality. And the only people who are going to be doing that are the kind of people who are talking about we have to end austerity. Neoliberalism is a complete failure. It only benefits the 1%. And the whole trickle-down idea is a complete lie. And we need to change this immediately. You know, and we need to, but we need to do this as an international movement. So it's really important what you're bringing up, and you know, the situation's only going to get worse with Libya in particular. 250,000 refugees at least are expected in the next 6 months who are trying to get away, and as you say, it's live or die for them, and that's why, you know, so many people are prepared to risk their life on these little boats teetering across the oceans. You know, we're responsible for that. You know, and it's easy to change it, and we need to grow up about this, and we want to have politicians who talk in these terms, without a doubt.
Federico, thank you very much indeed. Thanks for making those points. Robert in Beckton says, Simon and Jamie, just about everything Laura said, that was our caller before Federico, made complete, perfect sense. Bravo, go green, it's the only way, says Robert. Jason in Poplar says, Simon, regarding Farage's lack of applause, Cuban Tony, who is how he is described, it's Tony from Enfield who was on earlier, underlined what Farage said, that the studio was selected based on 4 left-wing socialists versus UKIP. 80% of people in Britain want a referendum on EU membership. They want to decide for themselves now. As for SNP and their fishes, they had salmon and now sturgeon. Perhaps better to be kippers. Says Jason. Thank you for that.
Do they? 80% want a referendum?
I don't know that figure. Chris says Cameron's no-show was sensible. Miliband was competent. Nicola was resplendent. Poor Nigel. The others were dogged. As for me, I was entertained. Punch and Judy always has spoken to the human condition, says Chris. I think, presumably that's dogged, not dogged, actually. Dogged.
Dogged?
Yeah. It could be dogged, I don't know.
I don't think so.
No. Thank you, Chris. And thank you, Jamie, for this hour. I mean, it's been a fascinating hour.
Oh, is it gone already?
The election campaign is still underway. Do you think the country will change in your lifetime in the direction that you wish it to?
The world will change in my lifetime, as long as I don't drop dead in the next couple of years.
Well, you've given up smoking now, so
I've got plenty. I'm only halfway through. I'm 50. I'm a mere nipper. In my lifetime, or in our lifetime, Simon, we're going to see the world change in unimaginable ways. We cannot continue going on in the way that we're going on, and I've said this so many times in the show. We will look back, and this will be the chapter of shame, that the species managed to get to such a situation whereby they're being the entire species is being dictated to by a system, a profit-making system based on greed that benefits a tiny amount of the people. I mean, how embarrassing is that? And we will live through that. And we're going to be forced to because of catastrophic climate change, because of millions of people who are immigrants who, as I said quite a lot in the show tonight, actually, they have the choice between living or dying, and they have to immigrate. And we're responsible for all these things. But in the same way that we've been responsible for causing such, disastrous 50 years, we have the power to make it completely go in the different direction. I would say within our lifetime, we will actually be able to sit down and see equality as being something that we've reached towards throughout the world.
And very briefly, if people want to find out more about you and, of course, New Internationalist magazine, how can they do it?
I'm at Jamie Kelsey Fry. That's my Twitter handle. And
Give up smoking. Ask me how.
I won't name how I did it over the microphone, but it is good. And also, New Internationalist is newint.org. We've been going for 40 years. And it wins arguments if you read New Internationalist, without a doubt. Our current issue is about Monsanto, and that says a lot.
Thank you for coming in. It's good to see you as always. 1 minute to midnight, Simon Lederman Show, BBC London 94.9.